Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Bionicle Inspiration Series. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about weapons. This is a theme that always gets some requests. People always go, "Oh, Banish, give me a weapons episode." And so I'll deliver with a weapons episode. I was originally just going to focus on like one kind of weapon, but then I just saw all these cool MOCs, and I was like, "Oh, that's a pretty cool gun. That's pretty cool this." So we're going to be talking about all kinds of weapons in this episode of BIS today. And we want to, I kind of want to specifically in this episode really focus on the specific parts that people used. So when you yourself are building some weapons, you can go, oh, okay, well, all right, so from this episode, I realized that this piece and this piece, those are some things that worked well as some weapons in the MOCs that I saw. So maybe I should use some of those pieces in the stuff that I do. We can see what we can do. Just kind of that. If you have a rough idea of the parts that you'll need for the MOC will kind of just build itself because you've got the pieces already right in front of you once you picked them out kind of thing. So that's what we'll focus on specifically today. So let's jump on in. The first MOC we've got today is Úvod the Hunter by MANIAC. You might recognize this MOC. You might be like, but Ben, this has been on BIS before. In which you'd be wrong, because it was on the Whip Workshop, which isn't quite the same thing. But now he's finished the MOC, and he's put it on the thing. And that's so cool, because now he's gone full circle with the MOC. Yeah. Speaking of which, the Whip Workshop, I'm working on more episodes of that. That's still a thing, don't worry. Anyway, lots and lots of weapons on this guy, and I love that he does have so many weapons. I think that's so fitting and quite crucial to the character, because Úvod the Hunter, it's in the name. He's a hunter. He's like a bounty hunter kind of guy. He's a man of many talents, you know. So I like that he's given him so many weapons because he's a hunter. Of course he's going to have that many. So let's go over some of them. He's got this awesome sort of, not quite like a pop-out crossbow, but it kind of folds up a bit, I guess, just to make it transporting it a bit easier, which is a cool kind of in-character thing. Quite like that. Very nice kind of crossbow design here. Nice and simple. Uses one of these like minifigure dart pieces there as an arrow. Very clever. You could kind of use that as a flick-fire missile to some degree, the way he's done that. So a little bit of playability there too, but really fun little crossbow design there, using a bunch of those sort of curved connectory pieces there for the little hilt and stuff. Really awesome look, really awesome design. Taking a look at some of the other weapons that we've used. Oh, Ben, why are you rushing? Why are you rushing? We're going to focus on the pieces. We don't need to move on to the next weapon yet. So like we were saying, those sort of funky hinged connectory pieces that you can attach axles into and link them all up like that. Those things are perfect for this, whether they're at, a 90-degree angle, or 180-degree angle, or a 45-degree angle, or whatever angle you want. Like we see here, you can use them in any way. You can easily have used those too for the sort of kind of curvy bits on the crossbow there, but instead he's used some of those tentacle pieces. Of course, these are those sort of more kind of spidery looking tentacle pieces. You could have used any of the tentacle pieces and you would have got that look. So any of that kind of curved look or any sort of more kind of rod-shaped pieces and stuff like that would be great for kind of hilts or the actual blade itself, or some of the more curvy, funky bits. Because, we'll see some more later in the episode. You can always have your kind of more ornate weapons, and there are weapons that are more curved, kind of like a sort of a scythe or something like that. So all sorts of things like that. Anyway, now we'll jump to the next weapon, which is simply just using some of the typical weapon pieces from LEGO. There's a lot of them, and a lot of them are actually pretty cool. Nothing wrong with using some of those. But if you're kind of sitting around and you're like, Ben, I don't like that kind of weapon piece. I want to use something more different. Well, you could still use that piece, but do like MOCmania has done here and give it a really sick, awesome paint job so it looks like it's kind of got a bit of blood on it from some of his previous kills and stuff like that. Really simple paint job too, just get a bit of red paint, just kind of scuff it around the piece like that. Looks great. That's of course the customization route. You might not want to go down that path, but if you're interested in doing something like that, as we see here on this MOC, really nice thing to do there. So yeah, using some of those typical plain old weapon pieces, not going any sort of too custom in on them. Nothing wrong with using that. Or you do like this and use some of those funky Technic connectory pieces we were talking about before to kind of extend the sort of hilt a little bit more. Works really nicely here. We've also got this really cool gauntlet design here. So one, it just looks nice as a sort of more kind of interesting vambrass or something like that on the side of his arm. Nice little arm design there. But inverting that scroll piece there, so it has a little connector on the end, you can attach various weapons onto it, sort of kind of Assassin's Creed style. Not really, it's kind of the wrong direction for that, but still you can get sort of awesome wrist bladey kind of things. Really funky, cool weapon, one that you could, I'm sure you might have some MOCs lying around and you kind of look at the arms or other parts of their body and you go, oh, actually I could just attach weapons in like this, and there you go. Such an interesting way of doing a weapon design, kind of attaching it onto pre-existing armor or vambrasses of some kind like that. Very cool. And again, using just your typical plain old weapon pieces that come in Bionicle sets, or Hero Factory sets, or Bionicle G2, which is still kind of Bionicle, but kind of not, but kind of is. You understand. But then the coolest weapon is his shotgun, which is super rad, using, again, a whole bunch of those sort of various connectory pieces, including a few different ones that have different types of pin or axle connections on them, but that sort of stuff. And then these barrel pieces. Now, a bunch of those came in Exoforce sets, but there's a whole bunch of different barrel pieces you could use in multiple different sets. Heck, you could even just use various axles and pins and things like that, and it'll basically look like the barrel of a gun. But the coolest thing about this shotgun is the fact that it actually has some hinges attached to it, so he can kind of cock the gun and reload it and stuff like that. Super, super cool design. Great idea to use some of these hinge pieces like that to achieve that kind of playability function. Super, super rad and super, super cool. So nicely done. Oh, and of course he's also got this really awesome scythe here as well, using some of the pieces that actually came with the Umarak the Hunter sets, sort of repurposing some of those dark tan kind of claw pieces there. Looks super, super cool. And again, some of the pre-existing pieces we were talking about before, making their way into some more weapons. Great idea to use some of those parts. But now that we've spoken about all of his many different weapons, let's talk a bit about the MOC because it's super cool. Got a little bit more painted aspects on the MOC here. We take a look at the mask, kind of got this war paint down the side of his eye. Super, super cool. Very kind of tribal-like, kind of reminds me of the little bit of Thor Ragnarok or something like that. Awesome. Looks like he's ready for battle. Looks like he's ready for the hunt. Nice little addition there, of course, going a little custom, but it looks super cool. Really like the epic little foot design he's got here. Nice and simple, but looks sort of like, kind of like, I don't know, sort of slight modifications. Maybe the claws are actually sort of more robotic or something like that. But he looks like he means business. He looks a bit more savage with that sort of foot design like that. Looks cool. Also quite like the waist cape here, simply using the Darth Maul cape that came in the very last wave of Star Wars Ultra Build sets. Very, very simple cape connection there, not doing too much to it, just simply adding it onto the waist there. But looks super cool and fits super, super well too. The cloth edition on this is a lovely little idea. And the final thing that I love oh so much, and I'm so glad he listened to this in the Whip Workshop thing, because there's a beautiful aesthetic. The idea of having this sort of belt with all these masks of things that he's killed looks super, super rad. Love that idea. So much character in that little choice there to add that to the MOC. Very nice. Very cool. So that's it for this MOC by MOCmania. Let's move on to the next MOC, which is a MOC by the Rickster 204. And this is his self-MOC called Toa Drakova, Tower of Storm. So that's always something you can do yourself when you're building your own kind of weapon, is just going super ham on it. You know, whether your MOC is slightly larger or even slightly smaller, it can be fun to give them a big old huge weapon or axe or something like that, and you just pour a bunch of pieces in it and have a lot of fun doing so. And you might, you know, maybe you want the MOC to be able to really effectively hold up the weapon, so you kind of have to kind of counterbalance for weight a little bit, or you just go like full like Final Fantasy on it. You just have a freaking massive sword that is completely unproportional to it, but looks super cool. Great idea. Anyway, regardless, this is a cool weapon that he's gone super ham on and added heaps of pieces in. That's a really awesome result as a result. So again, we're seeing a whole bunch of these sort of various connectory kind of pieces here. Even seeing some of these funky cool pieces. You take a look at sort of where the hilt turns into sort of just the base of the blade there. This gunmetal piece that came on Stormer XL on his weapon as well, which is a really, really nifty, helpful piece for any kind of part of mocking, but I would say specifically it's very helpful for building your weapons like we see on this MOC here. So a very nice addition using that part. Very useful piece for this sort of thing. And then, of course, you've got a whole bunch of these different CCBS pieces that came in various G2 sets, just to kind of layer up the blade and armor it up a little bit, and then your typical base actual blade pieces here to kind of tip it off and round it off at the edge there. Really cool. So it's interesting to see that you can combine a lot of typical CCBS pieces as well as these various connectory pieces and just sort of put it all together until it looks like a weapon. You know, there's a bit of trial and error that you'd have to do with this. You just sort of keep playing around with the pieces and the different connections until you create something that looks like a really effective weapon. But kind of looking at this weapon here, you can, at least to me, I kind of look at it and go, you know what? While there are reoccurring pieces like we're seeing that appear in multiple different weapons that would be sort of your go-to pieces to use, you can really use anything to create a really effective weapon. It's just about having the time and patience to just sort of work out how it's going to look and how it's going to work. So yeah, anything's possible, guys. Anything's possible. Let's talk a little bit about the MOC now that we've spoken a bit about the weapon here. One thing I quite like about it, you kind of take a look at the torso here. You can see that golden, cool-looking Anika torso piece there that kind of makes up the bulk of the actual torso here. And I think what's super cool about that is he's then buffed it up with a whole bunch of different Hero Factory armor pieces on the sides and also kind of up there on the shoulders. And so you could argue that he's almost just made that a Nika build and then buffed it up on the sides and added a bit more, kind of making him a slightly larger build, larger than your typical Toa. But all he's done is just buffed it up with Hero Factory shells, Hero Factory bones, and a few other things to connect it in between. Which I think is a really interesting way of looking at it, and a great way to kind of take a sort of slightly smaller design and find ways of kind of buffing it out a bit more, making it into a larger stance, a sort of more dominating figure. I think it's really, really cool to see, and very nicely done too. So nice work. Let's now move on to the next mock, which is by Joshua Johnson, and this is the other self-mock of this episode, which is Josiel Moonstar. So this guy's got quite the plethora of weapons here, and all of them are pretty freaking rad. I really like a lot of them. So we take a look at his sort of more signature sword design here. Really, really cool. Again, seeing a bunch more of your typical base weapon pieces that come with general LEGO sets. We also see a bunch of kind of claw pieces as well, and then this funky ornate elves piece here to kind of create this sort of more ornate, interesting, intricate looking kind of hilt to the end of the sword there. It looks super, super cool. And then this kind of wheel piece thing in the middle here. I actually don't know what part that is. Don't tell anyone, but I have no idea. So if you know, you should tell me, because I don't know what it is. But interesting that everything connects onto it there, and it kind of creates this really funky, interesting design. So instead of having just your typical sort of beam that you just grasp onto, it's this sort of funky wheel kind of piece thing. Kind of similar to some of the weapons you might see in Black Panther. But just an interesting way of kind of grasping the sword there. Really, really ornate, funky design. And definitely thinking outside the box there, finding different ways of connecting it and different ways of kind of reinventing the wheel to some degree, because that's your typical base sword of having a sort of beam hilt, of having it be a circle instead. Great idea. Great idea. And then using a bunch of those 1x1 clip system pieces there to link it all together. Very nicely done. So you're using a bit of system in this this sword design here, a fair bit more, but very much pays off doing so, because you can get a lot more detail into it than you could have with kind of mainly just using your Bionicle pieces. So I really like it. Then we've got these funky sort of trans orange blades here. It kind of reminds me a little bit of old Gypsy Danger from Pacific Rim 2. And that's simply just pieces from Nexo Knight sets. Really awesome looking pieces from Nexo Knight sets. Makes me wish I'd bought the sets that those came in. But very, very cool. Very fun little addition to the mock there. Just simply finding some way of attaching it onto the lower arms there. Looks awesome. Great design. Great idea. And then he's also got this cool hammer piece here as well. So again, a little bit more system, using some lightsaber rods and other kind of lightsaber hilts and things like that to connect it all together. And then using these wheel pieces here to kind of form the base kind of main part of the hammer there. And then even adding some of the superhero effect pieces to give it a little bit more pizzazz and make it look like it's sort of charging up, has some sort of power effects going on with it. And we can see those power effects being used on other parts of this mock as well too. And, you know, whether or not it's on the weapon or it's just, you know, the mock has power over magic, using some of those superhero power effect pieces is a really good idea, because can kind of be a weapon without actually, like, you know, having to make a weapon. You just say, you know, I'm using magic or something cool, and then it's just a really simple, easy solution, but it still looks really cool. So I definitely recommend playing around with some of those pieces, because they're super rad. So yeah, again, bunch of different weapons on this mock, but all of them very cool, very interesting, funky designs. Lots to love. And speaking of lots to love, let's talk about this actual mock here. So one of my favorite things about it is it has this really sick kind of like flip-up mask head thing, where I didn't even think this would be how the head works, but apparently it's all just connected onto your typical G2 head, and it just flips up open, and then there's his face. How cool is that? I think that's super unique. I've not really seen anything like that before. Love the design, love the look. Great concept, great idea. And in general, there's kind of this interesting sort of more kind of detail-focused design and aesthetic throughout all of this mock here. Really awesome aesthetic, and a really, really effective example of that kind of design. Really, really nicely done. And definitely one of my favorite things about this mock is, I kind of almost mentioned it before, the vambrasses there on his wrists, how they kind of flow up a little bit using those teeth pieces, and some of those Exoforce bad guy robot arm pieces there kind of creates that sort of ornate gauntlet that he's wearing there. Really, really cool look. Very interesting little accent point on the mock there. Love it. Super, super cool. Let us now move on to the final bonus mock of this episode, which is by Poor Disadvantaged and is called Elvera Toa King and silver lining his sword, which is what we're going to specifically be focusing on. But of course, I will talk about this MOC because this MOC is super, super cool. But for now, the sword. So lots to love about this sword. Like a lot to love about it. Really, really nice sword design here. It uses one of those funky Ninjago spinner pieces on some of the newer kind of Ninjago spinny Majobos. I'll throw up a picture. And it's cool to see how effectively that sort of works as kind of the arm guard bit on the sword there. And you can kind of attach all sorts of different things around it like we're seeing here. It's awesome. Looks really, really cool. And then we take a look at the hilt there. He's used a whole bunch of those Ninjago minifigure mask pieces that kind of go around the face on the actual minifigures themselves. And sort of layering them all a bit like that kind of creates this really interesting texture on the hilt itself. I think that's a brilliant looking design and looks great. And we can see the way that those are attached is there's ball joints and then those guys are just sort of resting in the gaps in between. Interesting way of doing it. Really like it. And we take a look at the blade itself. It's actually brick built. So he's able to achieve his own sort of unique shape and design and able to attach it a bit more easily by having it be more primarily system. And we can also see that he's attached a little bit of like a little sticker thing here that says disadvantaged on it. Of course, poor disadvantaged made this. So he's also doubled this sword as a name badge, which is kind of cool. As we can see here, he was in fact wearing the sword as a little badge on his jumper, which cool. I love it. A very, very interesting way of wielding one sword. But now let's talk about this super, super cool MOC. So he's got a custom cape. Really, really cool. Love the idea of a dark green cape. I wish we had some dark green Bionicle capes. I would love to make a MOC with one. Looks awesome. And I love the fact that he's used those two sparkly Avokis there as just sort of like shoulder armor. You know, it's kind of close in terms of color to the gold on the rest of this MOC, but it's enough of a distinction that it kind of just looks a bit more kind of ornate, like it's a part of the cloak itself. And I like that. It's an interesting way of kind of introducing an accent color onto the MOC. It's super cool. And overall, this MOC has this awesome stature and design all over. But definitely one of the coolest things is, again, with those Ninjago spinnery things, he's used the sort of plastic cloth bit that was used as sort of like the kind of gliders on some of those spinners. And he's sort of tangled it up a bit and used it as a sort of a waistcoat here. And the colors on that specific kind of glidery piece there are very primarily gold, and so it kind of ties in with the rest of the MOC there. And the fact that it is that different texture lends itself to the fact that it would be a different texture because it's sort of a waist cloak cloth kind of thing. Really, really nice part use. Really, really cool to see, and it makes this MOC look even more awesome. I love how that looks. But then, of course, we've got this awesome funky headdress thing with these big old wings that go over his head. And we take a look at the back and we realize, hey, this is like a uniter, like the Bionicle G2, the second wave. What an awesome idea, having this kind of funky dragon companion guy here who sort of slots on the back and acts as this funky headdress, but also gives him cool wings. And this wing design is super awesome. A whole bunch of different wing pieces here using some, I believe, some Ben 10 wing pieces and other various dragon wings from Vikings and elves and all sorts of other themes as well. And then all these Chima feather pieces, we can see how those are attached with a whole bunch of different beams and boat studs and things to link them all together. Awesome looking design, really, really effective actual kind of feathered wings. Beautiful to see, absolutely awesome. And a really cool concept of it sort of attaching on there and giving it this interesting look. Very, very cool. So brilliant weapon and a brilliant MOC by a brilliant guy. Nice work. So that's been 4 weapon designs as well as 4 really cool MOCs that wield them. If you enjoyed the MOCs that you saw today, be sure to check the links in the description because all those dudes are there. You can check out some of the other stuff that they have done. And also while you're there, if you're interested in my own social media, that's there so you can check it out if you want. I ain't gonna force you to, but if you want to, it's there. Otherwise, that's it for this episode of the Bionicle Inspiration Series. If you want to submit some of your own MOCs to the show, by all means, you can. I should say this. I had a suggestion by one Ivan, which was a great idea, where normally I put out the polls in my community tab on my page, and I go, hey, what episode do you want to see? And I often include fan-submitted MOCs in those polls, and it always wins, because everyone wants to see their MOCs on the show. And I was like, okay. But then Mr. Ivan was like, maybe you should just do them, like, once every, 5 episodes, or once every 10 episodes or something, because everyone's just going to vote for those. And I was like, this is a really good point. So, I haven't figured out exactly what yet, but probably every, 5 episodes or every 10 episodes. I haven't figured that out yet, but it'll be like some kind of, odd or even number or something like that. That's when I'll do fan-submitted episodes. But if you want to, make theme suggestions, either just say them in the comments below, because I'll probably read it, or you go to the community tab and I'll put up some polls every so often. Sometimes I don't, sometimes just because I'm just like, I've already got a plan for the next episode. Or if I don't, I go, well, what episode do you want to see next? And you can vote from normally about 5 options there. And you can pick out your episode you want to see next week or a few weeks later or something like that. And you get a little bit of freedom about what episode you want next. But if you're like, Ben, I so need to see a self-mark episode. Like, you have no idea. You let me know. You say you reach out to me somewhere on the social medias or in the comments below or whatever. And man, we'll make it happen. You just tell me what you want and I'll do it. All right. Anyway, yeah, that's about it for this episode. There's enough updates and things. I was talking so much I forgot if I said how you submit mocks. Oh, I'm going to say it again. You can submit mocks through the email that you're currently seeing on your screen. You submit some pictures and some other information about the mock to that email. And hot dog, one day it'll be on the show. Anyway, that's it. Have a great day. Happy building. See you in the next one.